a tour of what you can do with it. By the way, for the project, the only thing you'll need to download is this photo, and you can download the instructions. Let me pass out the instructions, which I'm handing out to you now. So on both sides. Take one. We'll close this out. So Photoshop, down at the very bottom, we're looking for the blue icon this time. PS, Photoshop. And when you open it up, it'll open up similar to InDesign. It gives you a little splash screen. And the first thing you're greeted with is your work area. So a lot of this looks very, very similar. You've got all of your tools in the far left-hand side in your little toolbox. Of course, you can move it around. At the top, what was this called? Tool options. I think that was the most missed question on there. The tool options. So whatever tool you pick, there will be different options or different things that are available to customize that tool. We'll get into that once we start using the brush tool to work with. And usually on the very far right-hand side, you've got all the palettes that you're working in. Some palettes are a little bit more important than others because you'll use them more often. Others, I rarely open at all. And as usual, you've got your drop-down menus. From here, you can make new documents, save documents, print, and a variety of other things that you can do with a document that we're working with. So let's open up a picture and actually kind of see what we can do with it. So this is the picture we're going to be working with. Who can name the actress? I ask this every year. Who is she? She recently died maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And she, what? No, not Betty Davis. She was, huh? Judy Garland? Not Judy Garland. She was a U.S. ambassador. She was a child actor. Shirley Temple. Shirley Temple. Yeah, there you go. Now you see it. Yeah, this is Shirley Temple. Oh, she died. I know. So what we're going to do is we're going to colorize her photograph, and in doing so, I'll teach you kind of some of how Photoshop works. There's a couple of ways you can open an image. I'm going to do it 2 different ways. First of all, if you're in Photoshop, you can always go to File, down to Open, and then find wherever your photograph is saved. In my case, it's on the desktop, and there it is right there. When I hit Open, it'll open up this way. Come on, give it a second. There it is. I'm going to close it out. Another way, a quicker way of doing it, is you can drag the photograph down to the dock and let it hover over this icon, and when you release it, it'll open up that way as well. That's kind of a nice thing that the Macintosh environment allows you to do, is just to drag and drop things onto here. When you open up a photo, notice that it has its window all by itself. Yours may look a little bit different. Right now I can see my background that I'm working on, and this is kind of good if I wanted to quickly click on the desktop and find some other photo. If you have your application frame turned on, it'll look like this. I'm going to go to Window and turn on my frame. Now my workout environment looks like this. I've got my palettes are kind of stuck inside of this frame, and I can move everything around, and I can't see my background as well. If I click at the very bottom right-hand corner, I can readjust the size of it and work within here. So some people find it more comfortable working with the application frame turned on or off. Whichever works best for you, that's what that does. I kind of like it turned off. So I'm going to turn off my application. But if I do want to blank out this background, I can still click the bottom right-hand corner, and this will give me plenty of room to work with on here. One of the most important palettes that you need to have open is your Layers palette. It's usually on the bottom right-hand side. I'm going to click and drag it off just so we can see it. So Photoshop is a layer-based editing software. Not only am I editing the pixels, I can layer things up and put things one on top of the other. By default, we got to have a background layer, and that's usually whatever your picture is. If I was to make a new document, and we'll get into this in the next project, it's going to be really big. By default, my background is going to be white. So whenever I create it, that background-most layer is called the background. It's the first layer that you have. So if I wanted to start editing this photograph, we're going to be colorizing it. And we're going to be using our paintbrush tool just for today. If I click and hold, remember you can find some other brushes or other things underneath it. What we're looking for is just the brush tool. And let's check out our options that we have at the very, very top. So the first one that we have is the size of the brush that we're working on. Right now I've got it at 25. That means it's 25 pixels. Can y'all see really close how small that circle is? That's 25 pixels wide. So if I was to click and drag, it'll make a line that looks like this. Of course, if I go to undo that, I can go to Edit and undo it, step back, and I'm back to there as well. If I needed a larger brush, I can click the down arrow, and this will give me a size and even some different styles that I can choose from. The size is pretty self-explanatory. Make it larger. Now I've got a larger brush to fill in a larger area. The hardness has to do with the softness or the hardness of the edge of the brush. So if I click and drag, see how soft that edge is? It's very feathered, very pixely on the edge. Let's bump up the hardness. Right now it's at 0%. Let's make it a very hard-edged brush, 100%. Compare that to this line. See the difference? That's the difference between a soft and a hard-edged brush. If I'm an illustrator, or if I'm a person who's doing some sort of photo manipulation, and I want to quickly or easily blend something, the soft edge brush allows me to blend a lot easily, a lot more easier. I'm making up words. However, a hard edge brush will give me a more precise edge that I can work with if that's what I needed. Additionally, down here at the bottom, you've got some other styles of brush. You don't have to be set with a rounded brush. Let's choose some of these textured ones. I love working with these. So with this one, we'll make it a little bit larger. I get a brush that's not round. Instead, it's kind of this shape. Let's change my color so we can actually see what we're working with. There we go. So this would allow me to add textures or blend things together with a specific texture to that. Same way with these other ones. Sometimes you got to make them large enough to be able to see, or you can click and drag. That one's going really slow to do that. Another one, these at the top, have to do if you have a digital drawing pad. I don't have my drawing pad hooked up to here, but if you do accidentally select one, in this case, I've got a little preview of what my pen looks like. A digital drawing pad will give you, it's literally a digital pen. You've got a little surface that you can draw on. It measures the pressure of how hard you're holding down on it and sometimes what angle you're holding the pen at. This is great if you're kind of used to doing a traditional media and you can draw on them. They're kind of expensive. The best ones are really expensive, or you can get a cheaper one that just measures your pressure. But you can see the type that it looks like. So you can see it's wiggling around as I move. It'll change up the position of the brushes or which way they're moving based on my direction or how hard I'm clicking. Since I'm not using it, obviously it's not doing much for that one. And the last one, let's see if I got a pattern brush. Yeah, here's a pattern brush. In this case, it's a predefined pattern. It's like in the shape of a leaf. If I was to click and drag, there we go. I can quickly paint over some leaves from there. So Photoshop has a lot of brushes that you can use. Some you'll use more than others. I've completely ruined and graffitied her face. So let's back it up. You know you can always go to Edit and Undo, and it will back up the last thing that you do. However, if I go to undo again, it's not going to undo it. It's just going to redo it. So really, I can only undo and redo the last thing that I did. So how do I back up if I wanted to undo more things that I have? This is where another palette comes in handy. And it's your History palette. You can go to Window, down to History. And this is where it'll open up from this one. The History palette is recording everything that I do up to the last about 40 moves that I did. So every time I use my paintbrush, it added on to this one. So if I was to click on it, I can actually go back in time and undo what I'm doing if I need to undo further. It doesn't go all the way back to the beginning, but it will last 40 things. Pretty cool? So, two of the most important ones. Obviously, there's where it's going to stop for me. I said 40. It looks like it's a whole lot less, or I can configure that later. But the History palette allows you to undo or back up. The Layers palette lets you know what layer you're working on. Right now, we're working on the background layer. I'm going to click on the Restore Photo, and that'll bring me back to my original opening. So, I want to be able to paint on top of here, but I don't want to mess her up. Because if I paint, you can see even in my preview, I'm moving those pixels around. Let's undo that. So in Photoshop, what I want to do is to make a new layer. Think of it as adding like a layer of transparency on top of my background layer. At the very bottom of your Layers palette, look for this little icon. When I click it, check out what I have now. Layer 1, it's even got a little checkered box. That means it's transparent. Now I'm going to do the same thing. Let's get a regular brush on top of here. If I click and drag, it's painting, but check out what layer I'm painting in. It's in layer 1. This means I can do whatever I want in layer 1, and if I grab my eraser, I can actually erase it away, and I'm not affecting anything that's on the background layer. So this comes in handy if I'm trying to make a manipulation or make a change, but I don't want to affect certain parts of it. So in our case, we're painting on top of it. We're adding text, we're adding lines, those types of things to do it as well. All cool? Everybody following? Here's the next fun thing that you can do. Right now, if I was to paint on top of it in normal mode, all you're seeing is just the pixels. Pixels from one layer can interact with pixels from another layer. And this is called your blending mode. I told you we're working in normal. Here's your blending mode at the top of your Layers palette. When I click, I get a variety of ways I can tell layer 1 to interact with the background layer. Multiply, screen, overlay, each one does something a little bit different. So I'm going to choose multiply. Watch what happens. Multiply will, in this case, get all my dark pixels and blend them, multiply them together with the darker or lighter pixels on the bottom. Different ones will give you different effects. So obviously, color burn gives you that type of effect. Linear burn, a little bit different. Darker will give me that type of effect. And regardless what color or whatever I put on layer 1, that's how it's going to affect this one there. Pretty cool? Yeah. Lighten usually lightens it up or affects the just the darker colors. So I can paint over from this. Color dodge will look like that. So it's a great way of just kind of doing something, playing around with an image. If you have, if somebody gives me a very low quality image, sometimes I'll play around with this just to give it a more artistic kind of feel. This section tends to affect our midtones. Ooh. Difference will give me a almost negative kind of feel. You can see they're kind of grouped together based on what they do. And of course, color and hue will only affect the actual colors or the changing out from that. This is what we're going to be working with when we create our color layer that we're working on. So for this one, whatever I paint on this layer, obviously it's going to colorize it in. I've changed my blending mode to color, and that gives me a pretty good little range. So let's play around with this and see what we can do. If I wanted to erase this, I can use my eraser tool. The eraser, notice that the eraser works just like a paintbrush, in that I can change the size of it and even the hardness or the type of that I'm working with. Let's make it a little bit bigger so I can, it's way big. Notice how big that is. It's bigger than the actual file that I'm working on. 3,000 pixels. So very quickly erase it away. Let's grab our paintbrush again. And let's actually give her, what I want you to do for this particular project is paint everything that's inside of here. Paint her hair, the background, the skin color, the flowers that are in the front, anything that you want to do. I'm going to zoom in. Uh-oh, you're not seeing the same thing I am. Okay, hang on a second. Let's resume. Okay. If you want to zoom in, you got a little magnifying glass, and wherever I click, we'll zoom in. By the way, if I want to zoom out, hold down your Option key. Notice the little plus sign in the middle of it turns to a minus sign when I hold it down. I can zoom out that way as well. Let's zoom in and actually work on her face. I've got layer 1 selected. Now I've got color mode selected for the blending mode for layer 1. Let's paint it in. I'm going to grab the paintbrush, and I tell you, let's see, let's make the size around 100. You can change this up as needed. Set the hardness to 100%, so it's a very hard brush. And the opacity, by the way, you can paint in a lower opacity. So right now, set this to normal so I can show you this. If I was to paint, I got 100% green going on. If I drop my opacity any lower, I can build up a color. So now I'm painting at 40 or roughly 50% and build up that layer. So I don't have to go at 100% at what I'm working on. Let's erase that away. Okay, now let's have fun. To pick your color, y'all remember how to pick and choose a custom color in InDesign? Double click on your foreground swatch. And in this case, the skin color that I give you is red 255, so there's my R value. Green of 220, and a blue of 178. Cool. Nice neutral skin tone color that we can work from this. Now if I start painting, what's wrong with this? What did I not change up? Right here under normal, this is my blending mode. We're going to be working under color. Now it starts to look a little bit more natural to work with them here. I'm going to go just very quick. Obviously, you don't want to paint over her eye unless she's got the gout. One eye's got the gout. Okay, there's the other one. If I did choose white, that would kind of fix that. Let's make my brush a little bit smaller. If it's a smaller area, you'll need a smaller brush, and that'll just kind of turn it back to the black and white. If I wanted to paint her lips, I can choose a red color. Paint on top of there. Perhaps I'll drop the hardness of this and give me a little softer edge to work with. Click and drag over. I'm going quick, so obviously I'm getting off the edges there. Don't be afraid to zoom in. Don't be afraid to make your brush a lot smaller. If you wanted to give her, say, rosy cheeks, let's make the brush a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger than that. Let's make it very, very soft and even drop the opacity a little bit. Now I can click and drag and add a little hue to the cheek area. Cool? Y'all kind of get the idea? Go what? Huh? Say again? Looks like a doll? Yeah, it looks a little... Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, it's almost pristine. It's too perfect. Hey, let's go wild with it. Let's put this back up to 100%. You don't have to make it look like a doll. If you want to give her green hair, you are welcome to do that as well. The main thing is I want you to play around using the tools and working within the color modes that we're working with. Got her hair one color, do the background another color, give her clothing and the flowers a specific color to work within as well. Cool? Make it look as good as possible. Once you've done this, you can play around with the blending modes and see what else. Wow.
Go back.
Sometimes you don't know what you get until you choose it. But play around with the blending modes. You can see what other things that you get from this. Some are better than others. It's obviously going to make it too dark. Color tends to be the best one to give you the best results that we're working on. To save this, once we're finished, we're going to save it as a JPEG format. Here's how to save. Under File, down to, there it is, Save. By default, the Photoshop format is what it's going to give you. Now, if you save as a Photoshop, it's also going to save all of your layers that you're working in, which is good if you want to come back to it and keep adding on to it, because it'll save layer 1 or however many layers you have. But once you're finished, I want it to be saved as a JPEG, so it'll be a smaller file, but it's going to give you a warning saying, hey, JPEGs don't save layers, so it's going to literally flatten your image, and you're just going to have the one layer that you're working on. That's totally okay once you're finished. So Photoshop Project 1, save it as a JPEG. When you hit save, it's going to ask you what quality do you want to do it. I'm going to keep it as a large file. That's okay. And then I should have it saved. There it is on my desktop from there. This is what you're going to upload to Moodle once you're finished. Cool? Very simple, very basic introduction to Photoshop. Keeping it simple this time because remember, we don't have class. Next